Well, in looking at the political situation leading up to the coming of Messiah, we have been examining what occurred beginning at the Maccabean revolt. We'd already talked about some of that previously, but we reviewed a little bit to see what happened in the family of the Hasmoneans, who were running things in Israel for quite some time. And we have to say that in some ways not doing a very good job of it, at least morally, ethically, but in some ways did much to expand the kingdom. The last person that we were talking about the last time we were together was Alexander Jannaeus, or Alexander Jannaeus. Whoops, that's not the right guy, I think. So I thought I had him in the right spot. Or was it? Oh, no. We weren't at Aristobulus, weren't we? I think maybe there was one more thing. Did we say Aristobulus was a brutal word? Did we get that?
Yeah.
Number 4 of what?
We're on Alexander, but we're on the letter E.
Alexander Jannaeus?
Yeah.
Okay, so we were there. All right. So we know that he was known for his cruelty, his passion for war and expansion. He sided with the Sadducees against the Pharisees. His territories reached the same extent as David and Solomon. So he had control over quite a large territory. Yes, I now remember. We were just about to go to this next point, the last point under Alexander Jannaeus, and that is that executions became so commonplace under his rule that many Jews began to emigrate, that is, leave the country. And they especially went to Alexandria, Egypt. So there was a large Jewish population there. Well, there were so many people leaving Israel that it became a problem. And so they had to do something to stop this mass exodus from Israel. Well, what happened is a couple of rabbis issued a new law. And it said this: those who forsake the Holy Land for other countries are ritually unclean. So in other words, if you leave the land of Israel to live somewhere else, you are ritually unclean, which means you can't do what?
Make sacrifices.
Make sacrifices in the temple. You can't come to the temple. Well, what does that mean to the average Jew?
Everything.
Well, what do you mean? What? So what?
They can confess their sins.
Yeah, so they can't come to God. So in our vernacular, we might say they can't be saved. They can't be forgiven of their sins if they can't go to the temple and make sacrifices. So would this stop people from leaving? Yeah, because they're more concerned with their spiritual state as they understand it than with the physical problems that are going on. So Alexander Jannaeus, or Jannaeus, was not a good guy. And you can't really see it very well here, but he is right there as a son of John Hyrcanus. Now, he's married to a woman named Salome Alexandria, and in a somewhat unprecedented move, she takes over when her husband dies. So Salome Alexandra succeeded her husband as the leader of Israel. Now, what's interesting is that, remember, her husband was pro-Sadducee and against the Pharisees, remember? Well, Salome Alexandra's brother is the leader of the Pharisees. So she's flip-flopped to the other side because of her brother. So under her rule, the Pharisees were restored to their place in the Sanhedrin. Now, a lot of feminists would make much of this. I'm sorry, I thought I had that up there. That under a woman, it was rather peaceful. Some think that women ought to run all the countries, and then we'd have peace. I don't know. What do you think? Well, we have had women rulers that weren't so peaceful too, but they had peace there. But her pro-Pharisee position would later lead to civil war between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, just not during her reign. Many laws were enacted during her time, so there was a lot of progress. But civil war does break out upon her death between her two sons. And that's where we'll look next. The Civil War and the advent of a guy by the name of Antipater. All right, so in the Civil War that takes place, we see that we have had Alexander Jannaeus following his brother Aristobulus I. Alexander is followed by his wife Salome Alexandria, and this couple has two sons, John Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II. You can see this guy is named after John Hyrcanus here, and Aristobulus is named after his uncle, Aristobulus I. So these two guys are the next in line to rule. Hyrcanus II is the older of the two, so normally he would be the one to come into power, and he does initially. Hyrcanus is a quiet guy, however. He's a real peaceful fellow, and he had the support of the Pharisees. His brother Aristobulus was supported by the Sadducees. So you see we got this conflict between the two groups again. Well, Aristobulus talked to his older brother and said, you know, John, you really don't enjoy ruling. You're not that kind of guy. You don't really like being a ruler, so why don't you just step aside and let me take over? And Hyrcanus kind of listened to him and decided, yeah, I guess you're really right. So he gave up the throne to his brother. Well, at that point, then Hyrcanus' army decides there's no reason for them to stick around if their leader is not going to at least fight for the throne. So they left. And at that point, there's a guy that comes up from Idumea. Remember, Idumea is down here to the south of Judea. And who is it that lives in Idumea? What people had moved over into Idumea? Do you remember? It sounds a lot like Idumea. The Edomites. So this guy is an Edomite living here, and his name is Antipater. And he comes up into the area and gets the ear of Hyrcanus and says, you know, your brother really is cheating you out of what is rightfully yours, and you shouldn't stand for it. And so he convinced him to resume the war between himself and his brother. Antipater told Hyrcanus that if he was to just flee the area, go down to the city of Petra, to the king Aretas who's there, that he would then receive the kingdom, and Antipater would help him regain it. Well, as the brothers fought, neither side won. It was a stalemate. And so it was Antipater's idea, I think, to appeal to a third party to settle this. Who's going to be the leader of Israel? And Antipater suggested they appeal to a Roman general who was in that part of the world, who was, in the process of expanding Roman influence, whose name was Pompey. Do you remember Pompey? Who was Pompey ruling? With whom was Pompey ruling at this time? The two of them were ruling together. They had a triumvirate, but then one of them died. So Pompey is splitting the Roman Empire with what other famous figure? Do you remember?
Octavian.
No, it's before this, before Octavian. Julius Caesar. Remember the two? They're buddies, right? They're ruling the world together. Well, Pompey is the one that's over in the eastern part of the empire, close to where this conflict is taking place. Well, Antipater influenced Pompey in his decision toward choosing Hyrcanus. So Pompey sided with John Hyrcanus. Well, as a part of his involvement, he also comes into Jerusalem. Pompey does, and he has no regard for the Jewish people or the temple, and so he just walks right into the temple, walks right into the holy place, and into the Holy of Holies in the temple. Basically his very presence would desecrate the temple, but he doesn't care. He just walks right in, and he installs Hyrcanus as high priest in Israel. And then Pompey had already gained influence up in Syria. He put his own ruler in there. All right, so Hyrcanus is the ruler through the influence, through the goading of Antipater, and then the influence of the Roman general Pompey. All right, we're following so far? Okay, try to keep these guys straight. All right, so what happens with Antipater? Antipater is really Antipater II, but we won't have to worry about the number here. Antipater really is the real power behind the throne of Hyrcanus. Remember, Hyrcanus was a peaceful, gentle guy. Well, Antipater is the one that really is behind him, telling him what to do. Antipater really is controlling things. And Antipater was a great opportunist. He just seemed to know where to be at the right time and what to do. It just seemed like things went his way. He always had a knack for being in the right place at the right time. And in 49 BC, you might remember that Julius Caesar became emperor of Rome and waged war against Pompey. Remember that? And where did Pompey end up running? Do you remember? To get away from Caesar, and then they were going to fight there. Do you remember where Pompey went? Down to Egypt. Good, John. So he goes down to Egypt, and Caesar doesn't have enough troops really to conquer Pompey, and who shows up but Antipater with some more troops. Just at the right time. And went against his old friend Pompey, because he could see that Julius Caesar really is the man of the future. So remember before we talked about Pompey being killed and his head being handed to Caesar, and I said we'll come back to that later, Pompey being killed in Egypt. Well, this is the later. This is where it happens. It is Antipater that defeats Pompey, that kills Pompey, and provides that for Julius Caesar. And so there's that connection then with the land of Israel through Antipater, who is controlling Hyrcanus. All right, we're following that. Hopefully you can follow along as we're seeing it come up here in the notes, and you can fill in what you need. All right, so after Julius Caesar's victory over Pompey, he made Hyrcanus ethnarch of the Jews. So Julius Caesar is assuming control over the land of Israel. And he appoints Hyrcanus as being an ethnarch. Now, ethnarch is like a king, only not quite. It's kind of like a sub-king. So he's a king under another ruler. And so Hyrcanus is given this position by Julius Caesar, indicating that he is under Caesar's control. And remember, Hyrcanus had been appointed high priest before by Pompey. So now he's both high priest and he's an ethnarch. Caesar then rewarded Antipater II the citizenship of Rome, and also made him a governor over Judea. So Hyrcanus is considered the ethnarch of the Jews, but Antipater really is the one who's ruling over all the area of Judea. Excuse me. All right, now Aristobulus, remember the brother of Hyrcanus, he and his two sons, Alexander and Antigonus, were sent to Rome. So Rome took care of them. They took them to Rome, and they're in exile, so they won't cause any more problems for Hyrcanus. Well, Aristobulus, however, was able to escape from Rome, reassemble an army, and came in and retook Jerusalem away from Hyrcanus. Rome then sent troops, from which Aristobulus defended himself for 3 years before being captured. But he was captured once again, taken to Rome, and there, this time, he was executed along with his son Alexander. So things did not turn out well for Aristobulus II, primarily because Rome has intervened. And Rome is going to gain more and more influence and power in the area. Well, in so Antipater is able to come back into control once the Romans have driven out Aristobulus. Antipater comes back into control, And his sons were given positions as well. One was appointed governor over Galilee, and another was appointed governor over Jerusalem. The one who was appointed governor of Galilee's name was Herod, and his brother Phaziel was appointed governor over Jerusalem. And in addition, Mark Antony deposed Hyrcanus from the priesthood. He said, "You're no longer priest." So Hyrcanus has lost his ruling ability both politically and spiritually. It's been taken away by Rome. All right, so that brings us to the end of the Civil War, really, because Rome has now taken over. But in the aftermath of the Civil War, Julius Caesar was assassinated. You remember what occurred there. And after his assassination, we find that apparently Antipater was also assassinated because he was poisoned. Antipater was poisoned. So Julius Caesar is gone, and you remember who follows Julius Caesar. Who follows him and is really considered the first emperor. Caesar Augustus, or Octavian, right? So we'll come to him next. All right, here then we have Herod avenging his father's assassination, his poisoning, the unrest that came with that. He was appointed over Galilee. His brother Phaziel is appointed governor over Jerusalem, and Mark Antony deposed Hyrcanus from the priesthood. All right, any questions to this point? I know it's a lot of names, and some of them are similar, but I wanted to get you to at least understand the flow of things, what's happening here. And the most important thing of all is that Rome is getting more and more control. You see that? The Jewish people have less control, and those that are under Rome controlling the area of Israel are not Jewish, but what? You've got Antipater, who is now dead, but his sons, Herod and Phaziel, are ruling, and what nationality are they? What was Antipater? From where did he come? Down here? What's this area down here? South of Judea? Idumea. So they are what nationality? Edomites. So Herod and Phaziel ruling over Israel are Edomites. Now, let's go back one more step. Who was the ancestor of the Edomites? Esau. What kind of relationship was there between the Edomites and the Israelites? Not good, right? But here are a couple of guys that are of an enemy people that are ruling over the area of Israel under the authority of Rome. Now, we're going to center our attention upon one of these rulers because we're going to see that he's going to have a great impact, and that is this guy by the name of Herod. You've heard of Herod, have you not? Yes, you have, I'm sure. All right, so next in our notes, we're going to look at the establishment of the Herodian dynasty. Herod, as we just said, became governor of Galilee, up here, and he proved to be a very good administrator in Galilee. One of the good things he did is he got rid of all the robbers in Galilee, so it was no longer a place where robbers could hang out and people could travel with much more ease and safety. Now, the struggle for the kingdom, however, continues. There's about him being governor. Antigonus, if you look back at your chart of the Hasmonean family, you'll see Antigonus was the second son of Aristobulus. All right, what happened to Aristobulus? Think back a few minutes. Look back in your notes. What happened to Aristobulus? No, that was Antipater. I know these names will all begin with A. Aristobulus, what happened to him? He was executed by Rome along with his oldest son. Remember? Well, he's got a second son, Antigonus. Of course, his father, Aristobulus, had rebelled against Rome and been executed. But Antigonus escaped Rome, like his father had before. And this time, he doesn't try to capture Jerusalem on his own. He gets the help of another group of people called the Parthians. Now, who are the Parthians? Well, here's the empire. Here are the empires at the time. You can see where the Roman Empire is. What we know most about that. We see a couple other kingdoms down here. Over here, we see the Han Dynasty. Maybe you've heard of them, of China, and the Kushan Empire. But here, in the middle of it all, is the Parthian Empire. Now, Parthian Empire was what was left from the old Persian Empire. So it has a lot of that Persian flavor. And you can see because of the proximity of the Parthians and the Romans that there's a lot of conflict between the two. So the Parthians are always looking at ways to take away some of what belongs to Rome. And so they see an opportunity here to help this guy come into Jerusalem and drive the Romans out. All right, you follow? So the Parthians crowned Antigonus king, and then Antigonus, with the Parthian army behind him, goes into Jerusalem. Here's just looking at the Parthian Empire itself. You can see how large it was. And so the Parthians help Antigonus to go in and drive out the Romans that were there, but in particular Phaziel, who is the ruler over Jerusalem and Judea, and we find that Herod also attempts to get away because the Parthians have come in and have established Antigonus as king. Well, Antigonus, in order to make sure that he has no more problems with Hyrcanus, his uncle, remember, had fought against his father before, and so he cuts off his ear. He cuts off his ear. Why? Because he didn't want him to hear anything? No, because if his ear is missing, he can never be high priest again. Because you can't be even a priest in the temple if you have any physical defects. In fact, that would go even so far as if you were bald. You couldn't function as a priest in the temple. So by cutting off his ear, he eliminates Hyrcanus from ever being the high priest again. All right, so here come the Parthians. They help Antigonus come in and attack Jerusalem. They capture Phaziel, who is Herod's brother, and are on the way taking him back to Parthia when Phaziel dies. Most people think that he committed suicide rather than be taken back as a captive. But at any rate, Herod blamed the Parthians for the death of his brother, whether they caused it specifically or were simply the ones that had captured him. Well, Antigonus realizes that Herod is a problem, so he starts going after him. But Herod and his family fled to the south. Now, at this time, Herod and his family included his wife Mariamne, who was a Hasmonean. So she's related to Antigonus. But Herod takes her and his family, and he left them at a place that you know. Oh, I thought I had a picture of it here. Yeah, okay, it's next. Masada. Now, it wasn't built up like it shows in his pictures at that point yet. Herod would work on that later. But he left his family there at Masada. Here's a model of Masada that's located up on top of the tabletop. Here are some pictures of Masada today. You can see the the number of walls and buildings that are there, that are still there. Much of it in ruins, of course, but it's quite a large area, quite detailed in the number of buildings that were built there. And it was built as a fortress, as a place where Herod, later on, he built it up even more so that he would have a place to defend himself if he ever was attacked by his own people. Here's looking out from Masada. You can see here some blue. Anybody want to hazard a guess as to what that is?
Let's see.
Not the Red Sea.
Now?
Nope, not the Nile. Not that close to Egypt. How's it look all around here? See a lot of vegetation? The Dead Sea. So this area is a very dry area, very desolate area. There's nothing grows around here. That's the Dead Sea. You know, a lot of things are covered with salt just in the general vicinity. So at some point, Herod is going to build cisterns, all kinds of container to hold grain and water so that he could live there for a long time if he needed to. Okay, here's another picture of Masada, looking out over the countryside. These were all buildings, the walls that remain. I thought this was interesting. Inside, you can see that by the existence of these parts of frescoes, that the walls were at one time painted with a lot of beautiful colors and pictures on them. And most of it has worn away, but here's a little bit that's left. And there's looking at the outside when you get off of the tram. This, comes up on cable lines and get off and go in. You can walk up the path, but it's a long, arduous trip. In fact, the day we were there, they closed it. They said it was too hot for people to climb it. It was, from 100 degrees. Later, when Herod constructs it, it will have an entertainment hall. Below it, on the lower level, there's a bathhouse. And you can still see today the outline of where the Roman camp was that was put there in 70 AD that you have learned about before when the Romans laid siege to Masada. We'll come back to that. And there's a model. There used to be the entertainment area. This is the bathhouse. But Herod himself leaves his family in Masada, and he flees to a place called Petra. Any of you ever heard of Petra? It's famous as being a city built in the sides of cliffs, the city of rocks. Petra, the word itself means rock. And one of my favorite Christian rock bands of the 80s and 90s, I think mostly. It's called Petra. And you saw a song by them in the videos we watched from Don't Check Your Brains at the Door. All right, so that's where they got their name. So to show you a little bit about Petra. Petra was on a major trade route. That's why it was there, where it was located. So here's the Red Sea. Here's it's called the Sinai Peninsula. The Red Sea goes up here and here. Petra is right here. So all these trading routes would go through this area, and of course using camels as their trucks, their caravans. Can you tell what this is? This is a statue that has been worn away. Can you tell? Here's something, and then here's something, and here's something. Can you tell what that is? What's this look like right here? That's a person, yeah. See his feet? Okay. What about this? Being that this city, Petra, is on a major trade route, what would they be honoring? A person leading a camel. These are camel's feet. All right, so there was one time a statue there showing that. Now they had to bring water into the city from outside, and so there was a large reservoir through which water then came through these troughs that were along the walking way. So pretty ingenious. Here's another picture of them. Walking back into the city, you have to walk through this kind of area first for, I think it's about a mile. Very beautiful, just naturally formed rock and colors and so on. You have to walk quite a ways in this before you come to the city itself. And then you burst open into this open area, and there you see this. All carved out of the side of a mountain. Can you imagine that? And they started at the top and carved down, which I think is pretty amazing too. You can see here, these holes are where they had the scaffolding from here to this across there as workers would work as they're carving, coming down. Amazing. They call this the treasury because it was such a wonderful building they thought it must have held treasure, but in reality now they found out that it was basically a tomb. Pretty huge tomb. There's a close-up of the bottom area. There's another building carved out of the side of the rocks. Here you can see what, it started down here. They dropped down from the top and started carving, coming down. There's some information about the street there, different styles, from tomb to tomb. A lot of these are tombs, these things that are carved on the side. But see the beautiful design of the rocks, that's just natural. You know, this would be where they would live. They didn't live in those big, elaborate places. That's where they buried people. They would live in caves like this. There's an amphitheater that the Romans built, much later than Herod. Any place the Romans go, they build amphitheaters. That's in the inside of one of the caves. This is at the ceiling, where the ceiling meets the wall. Look how beautiful that is. Beautiful rock. Colors. That's outside again. That day when we were there, it was 123 degrees. So pretty hot. I was up here climbing around different places. Here's some of the steps going up. All right, so Herod flees to Petra. He doesn't get the help he thinks he might get there, and so he heads back to Rome. And he's hoping that Rome will help him. And that's where we're going to have to stop today and find out what happens with him tomorrow. Now, since we're very close to where Matthew 2 comes into play, I want you to do something for tomorrow, and then hopefully we'll get to it. In your notes, there is a page entitled Story of the Magi. What I want you to do is just go through that story and cross off anything that you think isn't true. After you've read the story, then I want you to read Matthew 2. But don't go back and change anything. It'll be fun just to see what you think is true and what is not. All right? So for tomorrow, read the story of the Magi, cross off anything that doesn't belong, as far as you know, and then read Matthew 2, and we'll get to that hopefully tomorrow.